this is our schedule for the rest of the year. We're now in April, so you got an idea of what we're going to be doing there, and we actually have quite a bit planned out. And obviously, we want to see you. So if you have ideas that you'd like to talk about, I mean, we've got a lot of ideas of what we want to talk about, but we're always open to talking about things that you guys are interested in. So all you got to do is let us know. There is an evaluation that pops up after you exit. You can always let us know there in any of the comments that you want us to talk about something, and please do. We are certainly open to that. There is a community page now for here, let's do this. Cursor, where are you? There we go. Hello, cursor. Go to the next page. There we go. There is a community page now for Focus Fridays, and I want to urge you guys to join. All right. It's over in the TIBCO community, community.tibco.com. And if you go and take a look at the groups, there's one of the groups is Focus Fridays. There's a bunch of you that have joined already. This is a community group. I think there are 27 or 28 members right now. We'd like to see more. Now, we will very shortly, hopefully, move over to our own community. Just so that you know, TIBCO has gone through several structural changes recently, and the IBI product lines are all going to be merged back into a business unit that will be called IBI. So we will have an IBI webpage. IBI.com will be back. As a matter of fact, I think you can go to IBI.com right now and you'll see us there. That is a new page that you can reach us at. So I want to urge you to join. This is a great place if you have questions. The woman who, Shay, who is the one that organizes these virtual user groups and does all of our events, is basically managing this thing right now. And if you ask questions here, we'll get alerted and we'll certainly be glad to talk to you about it. So it's another way for you to reach us. All right. Okay, I'm from there. I'm going to end this and okay, and let's go back to, yes, we'll go back to Mr. Brangle. I'm going to.
Oh, no, aren't you going to show the IBI.com?
Oh, let's see. I just showed, no, that's a good question. Let's see, I'm sharing this screen. Sharing this screen, okay. Let's see if I can, I don't know whether I can get that live. No, I'm not going to be able, my system is not behaving.
Wait, something happened. There you go.
Welcome to IBI.com.
It's back.
See that? It's back. We're back. Now this is everybody. You'll notice that over under the events, there we are. The webinars, we're now considered a webinar, I guess, and you can sign up for these. We've got sign up pages up set up through July. The rest of those will go up pretty soon, in the next month or so. You'll notice there are also real user groups that are starting to show up. These are virtuals. There are some user groups that have been happening in a couple places in the country. So this is one place you can come to and check out and see what's going to be happening. Now, the thing that I always like is we are now on the Focus side. You can see here we're now a real product. We're now listed on this guy. So, as a matter of fact, we even have our own Focus page. So, for those of you that are interested in the language or who are working in the Focus mainframe, we have our own page here now, and there's stuff that you can get here. So keep an eye on us.
And there's actually a video here that was pointed out to me somewhere on these pages that talks about what Focus is.
Yeah, I'm probably is. There's a data sheet, And there's some new stuff coming. We're working on something right now that is really quite, I'm not gonna say anything about it. We'll wait. We got a surprise coming. And it's a good one.
So
So
hopefully at some point on our community page, we'll have a place for you to get the PowerPoints for all of our
correct.
sessions.
Yes, yeah. We want you to be able to access the PowerPoints easily, and that's where we're going to be targeting that. And we're going to try to centralize as much as possible so that you can get at it easily.
And also
Okay.
a nice link directly on the focus page to the documentation.
Wouldn't that be nice? And
So
one
it's
way
still a work in progress.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know, we've been through several reorganizations. When last fall, Tibco bought Citrix, um, and they merged Citrix with Tibco, and we've been through one structure, and we're about to go into another structure, and it's as you can imagine, you change structures, all of a sudden everything changes. All the systems that you're using, most of them are the same, but they're in different places. Right now, there's a lot of stuff out there that I know that I need, but I can't find it because it's on a different server, that kind of stuff. It's crazy. But this will get straightened out, and we'll be able to continue cruising along. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
And Mark, you want to take it away?
Mark?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And away we go.
Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da.
Before I start my very short presentation today, I just want to say thank you guys, because since the last couple of Focus Fridays, I've gotten some great inquiries into Maintain and how to use it. And I've had some of you trying the examples and coming to me for sample files and for demos. And that's really awesome, because I love connecting with you guys. I love talking with you guys. I certainly miss seeing you guys in person. So should anything I do during any of my presentations pique your interest, let me know. I can get you files, I can get you demos, I can get anything you need. Okay, so having said that, today we're going to discuss avoiding issues with date time fields and missing values in Maintain. Now that might sound very specific, and that's because the error is very specific. So we're going to get there. And again, this is a public service announcement on never getting this error. So one of the cool things about Maintain is that you can equate fields with different formats to each other. Maintain will automatically convert your values. You have an integer, you equate it to an alpha, we'll make it an alpha. If you have an alpha and you try to make it an integer, well, it'll usually be 1 or 0, but we're going to try. We can compute date fields to any other date formats. But we come to a single problem, and that's date time fields with missing values. So I'm going to show you some of the things we can do and some of the things we can't do. Now, I hope you guys won't mind, but today I'm going completely flatware. I'm not logging into the system. It's just easier this way for today. So I have a very small piece of Maintain code. I'm doing a module import for MNTUWS. Maintain has its own user-written subroutines that were not written by any users. Go with that. But I'm going to use today2. And what today2 does is it returns today's date as an A8 in MDYY format. So all I need to do is compute a variable, and I'm calling it today MDYY with a format of MDYY to the output that's going to come from today2. Today2 is only available in Maintain. Once I have that variable, I can then create additional variables. I can create a date field with YYMD and DMYY, and I can equate them together. Doesn't matter what the format is, I can just equate them. From this date today MDYY, I can have a YY variable, a Y variable, an M variable, a D variable. And when we run, we see that we get today's date into today MDYY, and all of the other formats are automatically available because they are smart dates and I can just use them in that way. For those of you who don't know what the very name smart dates means, before smart dates, you had your dates actually A8 MDYY or I8 MDYY, and you couldn't do a lot with them except display them. Smart dates allow you to do quite a bit more. So then I said, okay, what if today's date has no value? What if I tried to do something, but instead of going through the whole process of translating the dates, I'm not going to get today's date. I'm just going to have an empty variable. I do all the same calculations, but when I type, 3 of the date fields are blank, but the today, YY, M, and D are populated with the default date, December 31st, 1900. I'm actually a little surprised I don't see that here as well, but you should really test for that value. So then I said, okay, what if I do the same test, but I compute the variables to missing? And sure enough, every single variable came out with the missing character I was expecting. So I thought I was doing pretty good. But now it gets a little bit tricky. Up to this point, we've just been looking at smart dates and smart date components. At this point, I said, let's bring in date time fields. And in my first example, everything was fine. All right, we'll get to the question in a minute. So I was able to use I used hgetC, which is my favorite subroutine. It's available in all the WebFOCUS. You don't need the user-written subroutines, and I can create a variable with the smart date format and say hgetC, which takes the length of the variable and the variable you're trying to put it into. So that worked great. Now gave me yesterday's date and time when I built this presentation. Then I said, okay, I'm going to use hdate, which is a subroutine that brings back part of a smart date, give it the variable and the format, and the field name, and print that out. But I was also trying to see, what if I didn't use a subroutine and I just equated a smart date to a date time field? And wouldn't you know it, both the regular date field, the field using hdate to get the piece, and just doing the equation worked perfectly. So I thought, okay, I'm doing great now. I don't need to use hdate. I can just use maintains natural ability. And that's when it all went to badly. I said, well, what if my smart date has missing on? Because most of you have date time fields in your databases these days, and most of them do have missing on. So I said, okay, let me get today's date. And it said, okay, we'll get today's date. I said, now let me use hdate to get that format. I said, okay, that's great. And I said, okay, and now let me use maintains national ability. And it said, whoa, can't do that. It's incompatible. So I said, you know what? That makes perfect sense. It really isn't a compatible field with missing. So I know I really shouldn't use maintains natural ability to get the YMD portion of a smart date. I should always use hdate. And I was feeling pretty good about that until the next test, which tested a date time field with missing on. And I said, okay, let's use hdate. And this was the value I got. 77,385.30. And I said to programming, fix this. They said no. By the way, table works fine. So what am I getting at? This is what I would like you to do whenever you're trying to take a component from a date time field. I create a field I use now to have a date time field, but then I created a missing date field. Missing date is the same format of my date time field with missing on and no value. I then say if the current date variable is not equal to missing date, it has a value, then use HDate to get the component. Otherwise, don't do a thing. And in this way, if there is a value in the date, you will get the proper value after HDate. But if there's nothing in that field, we won't do anything and we'll still get a missing value, but not 77,005,031. So when you are using maintain to take the value of a smart date that a component of a smart date that has missing on, check it to see if it actually has a value before using HDate to get the component. And again, this was proving that if it this is proving that if it is missing, you get a correct value. And actually, I apologize. These two outputs are backwards. This one should be the dots, and this one should actually be the dates. But you'll see the logic is the same. If now is not equal missing, then get the value. So again, I apologize for that. On this one, we actually do get now and today YYMD as the smart date. And in here, we just get the missing characters. And Walter Brangle gets an assist because when we were trying to debug this, he was the one who insisted we keep testing it before we run it through HDate.
I was going to say this. That looks a little familiar.
Yeah. So, and as for the missing date field that I compute, I know I could say if date field equals missing or if date field equals a dot, which is the missing character, but I like creating a missing date field so I don't have to worry about the format or if anyone anywhere changes the missing character. So it's just personal use, it's trial and error, it's just something I've gotten to this point. Okay, so in summary, being able to equate fields with different formats, it's a great shortcut in maintain. Almost all the fields and formats come out correctly. You never need the edit function, but date time fields with missing values gave errors. So whenever possible, use the subroutines for date time fields, but check if the value exists before time. Okay, are there any questions?
Okay, remember, you can ask in the chat, or you can ask in the QA, or you can unmute.
Yeah, I think, do we have a question?
Art wants to know if can the automatic convert, I'm getting there, if the automatic conversion can change a date into an alpha IYYMD, AYYMD. I don't know. I'll tell you in a sec.
I think you're going to have to use a function like fprint.
Yeah, you may.
I will, for Art, my old boss, I will try it. So
On the engine side,
Thank you.
actually, let me continue sharing. Why not?
Yeah.
Start.
The reason I asked is this becomes an issue if you're creating a character string and you want to embed a date into it. You can't use the internal formats, the YMD, or HYYMD,
that's
or anything
right.
like that in the concatenation. You have to convert it to an alpha or an integer to do anything with it.
Mhm.
Well, 2023/04/21 is a valid YYMD, and compute then /I8 or A8. What would you prefer, Arthur?
Either one.
Let's say then 1/I8YMD or YYMD.
YYMD.
Okay.
Why?
Equals now.
That should work.
Type now equals now. Sorry. And I wasn't going to do this today, but let's see what happens. Then 1. All right, let's see what happens. I'm moving fast at least. Yeah, worked fine, Arthur. Does that answer your question? Can I mark this
Yes,
case
yes, it
closed?
does.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
one
gonna
of the
mark
th-
this case closed.
Yeah, one of the things that's been going on, and actually this isn't that new, the engine now is capable of doing automatic conversions between date times and dates. With
Well, unless
some,
there's a missing value, then be careful.
yeah. So in a lot of cases where you used to have to use a subroutine to pull something out, you don't necessarily need to do that anymore.
Well, again, Kathleen, I tried integer and alpha and both gave them the same value. Both
Yeah.
did work.
Yeah.
All right. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me via email or open cases. I love getting cases. I turn it over to Mr. Brinkle.
Okay, you should be able to see me now.
You or your screen? Yes, we can see both.
Fine. Thank you. Let me just pop something out here. Chat this over here. All right, so I'm going to talk about, again, creating functions. That's why I'm calling it creating functions revisited. So why are we revisiting this? So part of my presentation is going to be some of the functions that I went over previously, and then we're going to see why we're revisiting this. We'll do this quickly. Why do you want to create your own functions? You have code that you're going to use a lot of the time, and you want to keep it consistent, saves time, establishes rules, all that fun stuff. How do you create a function? Well, normally you do define file name. Now, these definitions are only active for the particular file that you're doing the define file on. A define function uses the same syntax, but the function now is available pretty much anywhere against any data source, including Dialog Manager. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. So this is one of the functions I did before. I call it the extremely simple example, where I have a function called profit, which takes two values and just subtracts one value from another. Okay, nothing exciting here. Here's another one doing a margin. So it's a little more complicated, but still simple. We're just doing an equation and getting the results. In this case, I'm doing the result via compute, and I'm also using it in a where statement. All right, now we get into the revisited part. I'm working on an application where I'm doing some data validation. I want to make sure when you put in a date, it's a true date, which kind of works well with what Mark just went over, because I'm going to do some of the same things that he had problems with, but I'm anticipating the problem on my side. I also want to pad fields, and depending on the field type, it's going to adjust the length of the padding, and if I'm padding on the left or padding on the right. And lastly, I want to get the length of a field, and we have lots of functions to do that, but none of them worked exactly the way I wanted them to. So let's just jump in. So in this case, I have defined file car, date one, which is a YYMD equals 2023-1031, and I'm going to have an add value of 90. So I want to add 90 days to the date. So in a define, it's very simple. I say new date, YYMD equals date one plus add value. Very simple. If I run a table and print those fields, this is the output I get. Notice my new date is January 29th, 2024, which is roughly 3 months from October 31st. If I convert this now into a dialog manager, so date one slash YYMD equals, I'm going to say set amper date one equals, I'm going to set amper add val equals, and then I'm going to, not knowing better, just add the two together like I did in define. So when I run that, my difference date is now 2023-11/21. So what really happened? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn echo on so I can see the intermediate results. So date 1 looks fine, add value looks fine. So if you notice, if I add 2023-1031 plus 90, I get 2023-11/21. So basically, there's no date smarts into this. Get it? Smart date. So Dialog Manager does not support smart date formats.
Correct.
Or does it? So for those of you who have used dates in Dialog Manager, you've discovered that in order to get this work, you have to convert the legacy date, the A8 values, into a smart date using the date convert function. So in this case, I'm converting a date 1 smart. I'm converting it from an I8 YYMD into a YYMD. I'm going to add the two values together, and then I'm going to convert it back. Because if I didn't convert it back, I would only see the offset value, which would be something like 44,000. Still not as high as what Mark saw with that 77,000. Kind of interesting. So when I run this now, notice I get the correct value I was expecting, 2024-0129. So far, I'm using functions that have already existed. I haven't created anything new. So I have several places where I need to check things. And I didn't want to have to create these conversion fields extra times than I really needed to. So enter define function. So I'm creating a function. The function is called myDateAdd. I'm passing it in the date in value and the add value. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that date in value because it's an A8. It's not an A8. There's no formatting to it. I'm going to put it into an A8 YYMD. Then I'm just going to move that field into date 1, which is a smart date. So what happens is if it's a valid date, everybody's happy. And I'm actually going to have a value. But if it's not a valid date, I'm going to get the default date of 12/31/1900. And if I look at the value, it's not going to have a value, just like we saw in Mark's presentation. So I'm doing the date in. I'm moving into a smart date. I'm adding 90. I'm doing the addition. So now, because I'm in a defined part of the code, I can add a smart date field to a value and get the proper results. I don't have to do any of my own conversion from using date convert from a smart date to a non-smart date. I say that I didn't do it using a date convert function, but if you notice, my date add is going to a format of A8 YYMD. So I am converting it back to an alpha format where I took the input value date and put it into the smart date format. But this is just a lot cleaner. So now I can use this function, set date 1 equals 2023-10/31, set add value equals 90, set new date final equals my date add, pass the two parameters, and I'm done. That's a lot more cleaner. And again, if you're doing this in a lot of places, you don't want to have to create all these temporary fields just in Dialog Manager to convert your formats back and forth. All right, so these are the functions in the project I'm actually working on. So I have a defined function, mylen. I pass it a value. In this case, it's a maximum of an A8. And I use the arglen function in order to get the length. Could I have done this all directly in Dialog Manager? Certainly. But again, if I'm validating multiple fields, I'm going to have to do one for each of the fields I'm validating. Here, I just need to call the function and pass the string in. Is a date. Is the date I'm passing you a real date? So again, I go date in, I move it to an I8. I move the I8 into a smart date. And if that smart date is 0, it doesn't have an offset, it's 0. It's December 31st, 1900. Then is date is going to have a value of 0 because it is not a date. Otherwise, it's going to have a value of 1. And this is the one I was talking about the padding. Define function myPad. I pass it a value and a type, because depending on the field I'm passing, I might be passing an S for serial number or an M for model. And if it's not either of those, it's going to be a number, a 3-character number. So if it's the serial number, I want a left pad with zeros. If it's the model number, I want a right pad with zeros. And if it's the number of CPUs, I want a left pad with zeros. Notice, depending on the format, I might have 7, 8, or 3 characters, which is why I can do an A8V. Okay, A8V, it's variable. Dialog Manager doesn't support A8V. It only has integer and alpha, and you get a fixed width. So this is another reason when you do define function, it gives you the flexibility of taking advantage of smart date formats and variable character fields. All right, that's it for there. I'm going to actually show you, maybe. Mark, Walt, do you see my terminal session?
Yep.
All good.
All right, so let's see, Ted, create keys, find is state, not there. So this is where I use mylen, and I just pass it the value. And I have 7 values of model, and I didn't want to have to then take and do in a dialog manager and maintain all these extra fields just to do the conversions. Let me show you what this looks like. So the serial number, I said I want to, the serial number I am left padding, the model I'm right padding, and the CPU I'm padding. So if I say ABC, 1, 2, 3, and 2, or 3, notice I get the left padding for serial, the right padding for model, and the right padding for CPUs. So any questions?
What? No questions?
So yeah, there's something in the chat. Oh God, it looks so ancient.
Not a question, but it's just beautiful to see one of those mainframe screens again.
Yeah, it's still alive and well.
Yep.
And in fact, the thing that Mr. Blood didn't talk about was the ability of doing CRT form from WebFOCUS.
Which is now live and real. That's actually, it's interesting. You can, from the console.
Now
you
that's
can,
worth a demonstration.
yeah, there's some stuff coming, and yeah, I'm not going to say. I can't say any more than that. There is
I'll
something.
go look at the schedule.
You can play. There's something in the console called Run as Focus, and you can play with that. Take a look at that. That's new. I think it's in 9.1 or 9.2. Try that.
Run as focus. Thanks, Walter.
Run as Focus, yes. And that'll give you, and there's some doc out there on that too, and that'll give you an idea of some of the direction that we're looking at. Yeah. I mean, CRT form is ancient technology. Yes, absolutely. No question about that. We have lots of customers that have a lot of this stuff still running. And our direction is to figure out a way to easily move them into the web world. So that's part of the direction that we're taking, and that's part of the thing you're seeing.
Mr. Art says, can you also use the AYMD user written subroutine? Sure, you can. We have, there's lots of ways to take care of these things.
Yeah.
I just wanted to show you something new. Walter 3, thank you. Nice. He says, nice. Check out the chat. There's some interesting comments about especially about a date book that you can get on Amazon.
Yeah, Vivian's, yes. Yes. Yep. That's right. Let's see.
Guys, anyone who's been in the focus world for, well, I want to say as long as we have, know there's at least 5 or 6 ways to do almost anything. So we just try to give you, you know, the things that we've come up with over the years. But yes, there's always multiple solutions.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if you've ever mentioned this, but one of the nice things about defined function is if you're ever dealing with something called Unix date, which is like a focus date, but the offset is different.
Yeah,
So if you have to
right.
convert, you just calculate the difference in offsets, add it to the appropriate value or subtract it, and you can go between a focus date and a Unix date.
Aha. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always a pain. When I was working on the Unix systems and other systems, any of the block mode systems versus the Unix stream systems, it was a royal pain to move code from one to the other because you design something on the Unix side and you take it over to one of the block mode systems like AS400 or Wang or mainframe, and the offsets are off. The offsets are different. Oh, okay. All right.
But the offset is a fixed amount that you can either add or subtract.
Right. Yeah, but it's a different base. It's actually a different base number. So it's like, wait a minute. I mean, Unix uses a different base for its dates than our base. And that was always an issue. That was a pain. All right. I guess it's my turn, huh? Here.
Yes, it is.
All right. Let me go over here. Let me do this first. Let me share first. And I want to share two. Let's share two. And then I'll start this sucker. And it's sharing. All right. There we go. Also reaching back a little into the past, I want to talk about today about the FOCUS database, the XFOCUS database, and some of the internal things. And for you old guys out there like Art, this is some of the stuff that we used to have to be very careful about in the old days. It's still important to understand because effectively what this is going to give you is the reason why we have to do certain things when we're working with FOCUS databases. And it also will make life a little bit easier if you're working with FOCUS databases and you don't know why you're having a problem. So let's take a look at some of the internals. Now, today, the database possibilities are, they're pretty, actually, there's a lot. I mean, initially, when I first got involved with this the issue was data file versus database. And the real issue there was, did I have metadata to support my data file? If I had metadata, I was really talking about a database. And the push was to get everybody into some sort of database that had metadata about the data files. So you didn't have to worry about, well, what's the actual structure of this file? Is it the same this week as it was last week? That sort of thing. Also, the idea of being able to query the data. And that was the most important thing initially. It was, how do I get my data out? And how do I get it out? I can put it in, and I have COBOL programs or assembler programs or RPG programs that will push the data into these data files. But how do I get the data out? And initially, FOCUS was really designed specifically with that problem in mind. The idea of being able to put data into a file, COBOL made that very easy. And COBOL, which died in 1996, is amazingly still there. It has been very prolific, and as a matter of fact, it's still the dominant language for putting data into data files. Now, we also need utilities to manage and manipulate this data storage, and this is what makes up a database. And FOCUS basically is one of those concepts. It's a database. It's like, if you take a look at the hierarchical systems, which were the first ones on the scenes, The space launch that we did back in the 60s were all built on IMS, which was the first database that was constructed. IBM used that to put to launch the rockets, and that's been around. That's still major. Still a lot of data living in there. Still a lot of COBOL managing that data. The hierarchical structure is very easy to use. It's a hierarchy, so you're reducing the amount of duplication by defining a parent-child relationship, and you only have one copy of the parent for any number of children. Now, there's something called, it's Plex, right? Jerry defined his version of the hierarchical database, which FOCUS is, as a Plex database. And he even wrote an article on this, and it was published in the journal quite a while ago. The idea being that most hierarchical structures have pointers going in one direction. They follow, they'll follow in one direction from the current chain of data values, or from the parent down to the children. And anytime you wanted to start over again, you had to go back to the top to start over and following the pointers down. The Plex database, and one of the things about FOCUS that is unique, is this ability to be able to have a pointer that points back. FOCUS maintains a pointer from the child to the parent, as well as from the parent to the child. And that actually has been one of the strengths of the database, because it makes retrieval much faster, especially in Modify. Now, there are also network databases out there like IDMS that actually allow you to define these tables or groups of fields and relate them any way you want. All right. The hierarchy doesn't, it could be hierarchy. It could be, it's the relationship between the segments or the tables is entirely defined by the network. And in that sense, it becomes the network, right? You can use, with IDMS, you can have relationships that are defined by expressions. So it's not just a simple, a data value that's being used to make the connection. It could actually be more complicated than that. And this is still there and still out there. And obviously the relational, which is the big thing these days, it's in the 90s, the relational wars took place. Oracle won and basically took over as the predominant engine for SQL. And there is one more, the columnar databases, which have been very popular these days. And all the ones above, from hierarchical down to relational, are row-based databases. They're dealing with data and they're storing it in rows, right? The columnar database basically made a change basically to, instead of storing data as rows, they stored it as columns. And this becomes very efficient when you're dealing with enormous amounts of data in data warehouses. It speeds up the retrieval. It's like there are light years worth of difference here. MariaDB is a big one over here. This Apache has several. They're all used primarily with enormous data volumes. Now, obviously today, we're seeing enormous amounts of data that are being used because of the web. And it's just amazing how much data is actually out there. We in FOCUS and in WebFOCUS, we map the structure of the file using a synonym. And basically the synonym tells us what's in the file, and it also tells us how to get to that file. All right. That's either a connection. It can also provide indexing capabilities. There are, especially in FOCUS, for the FOCUS partitions, you can have intelligent partitions. I can use an access file to basically set up what amounts to a series of use statements, only they're not uses. They're partitions. They're a list of files that I'm going to open in the order in which they're listed in this particular access file. All right, and I can have quite a few. So I can literally build a database that has, for instance, a, a, a data file for each day of the month, depending upon how much data is actually going to be in there. If you have an enormous volume of data each day, then you could very easily gather that data, put it into a single focus database, put it in as an intelligent partition. The intelligent partition meaning that we're going to include a where clause in this description to tell you what's in that file. Okay, everything in this file is Tuesday, April 1st. All right, that's okay. And that means that if I'm working with this data file, hopefully you're using the that field as one of your selection criteria. I can automatically open or not open those files based upon that. And that's a very powerful thing to do when you have to work with an enormous amount of data. If you can take some of the work and move it to the creation of the file, rather than at the time you're going to get the data out of the file, it'll save you a lot. Multidimensional indexes are also built using access files and maintained. Now, the master files basically contain the metadata that describes the file, it describes the segment and the field. And these are the three elements that we use to describe everything. Our syntax, our language for describe, our DDL for describing data is built around file, segment, and field. All right. And though everything has that, and we describe everything that way so that it's common. I can use the same language to describe IMS, IDMS, FOCUS, SQL, anything I want, even the columnar databases. Now, I can also add in here some very interesting things. I can add in things that don't necessarily exist as real. Defines, filters, computes, all right? I can put those in my master file. And if you don't know about that, that's something to take a look at, because these can be added to the master file and you can reference them, all right? Usually by the name that you give. And for instance, being able to give, to put the define in the master file means that you don't have to define it at the time you're doing a request, all right? It's there. Adding the filter or the compute, same thing. All you have to do is reference the filter name or the compute name, and it automatically brings the code in at the time that you run the request. Now, sort objects and style objects are kind of interesting too, because it allows you to actually build a chunk of a request and save that in the master file specifically for that particular master file, so that you have, for instance, specific sorts, and that include the on, any of the on things that you want to do, subtotaling, that sort of stuff, any page breaks, any of that kind of stuff can be built in automatically, and the end user only has to reference the sort object name, and he automatically gets all that stuff. So if you have something that needs to be like a defined function, all right, we're giving you another way to basically take stuff that you would use multiple times. And if you have an end user that doesn't know any of this stuff, especially in the WebFOCUS world, this is something that's referenceable and usable because it's in the master file, right? Same thing with style objects. DBA is also included in the master files, and that gives us our security, all right? Now, the FOCUS database itself it's a file, all right? It looks to all the world like a flat file. That's what it is. It's a 4K page. And let's talk a little bit about the physical aspects of the file so that you understand it, and then we'll talk a little bit about the focus, the XFOCUS. The partition size, how big a file can I make? I can make a file, one file of 512K pages, right? 4K pages, okay? And that gives you a 2 gigabyte database, right? That's the maximum. You can have in our world currently a maximum of 255 of these partitions defined for a single focus database, which means you can describe or you can work with about a half a terabyte with just focus files, right, using the maximum number of partitions. And I mean, if you're using multiple partitions, this is an easy way to do it. Structurally, the first page is is what we call the FDT, the file description table, and that there are also some root instances in that first page, all right? And I mention this because there's a difference as we move forward and take a look at the XFOCUS file. There's some differences. The segment names in FOCUS files are all limited to 8 characters, all right? And that's a pretty hard and fast. As a matter of fact, we didn't change that until quite recently. All right, and as a matter of fact, on the FOCUS side, we can't change that. There are limitations to the amount of space that we have available to us in the first page. That means that we basically are limited to 8 characters. We can't go beyond that. All right, that's not going to exchange. If you have to use segment names longer than 8 characters, you need to use an XFOCUS file. Right. Index field names also are limited, 12 characters max. All right. Now, the XFOCUS database grew out of the Fusion database, which we had for a while. And the question was, how do I build something bigger? 2 GB is not big enough. I need more space in a single file. And this is especially because the FOCUS database, there are some customers that are using FOCUS databases extensively for application development, right? And they're ingrained, and that's great. There are also the other big use of FOCUS databases is intermediate tables, intermediate files, and this is where we see it used a lot. Okay, and this is where it has basically its life. The ability to create these things on the fly with an on-table command, everybody does that. The good thing about it, a FOCUS database, one of the things that you can do with the FOCUS database is index it without having to go to the DBA and ask him if you can do that, right? It's easy to generate, doesn't require a lot of work on your part, which makes it easier for DBAs. Don't have to worry about this. Is not something I go into DB2 and asking them to allocate some more space, because you're going to need to add an index, and they're going to question you and grill you, and after you sign away your eldest child, they might give you the space. Now, this is FOCUS is there because it's easy to use, it's immediate, and it can be temporary. So in the XFOCUS world, we increased the size of the page. It's no longer a 4K page, it's now a 16K page, right? A lot bigger, 4 times the size. You can get 4, and that's actually considerably larger. The partition size, how big is a partition? We've increased that as well. There are now 1024K pages in an XFOCUS partition, right? Which means that the maximum partition size, and actually it doesn't mean, it turns out that the limit on the maximum was 16 gigabytes, but that has been up to 32 gigabytes. So you can now generate a single FOCUS partition or XFOCUS partition of 32 gig. Okay. Now, the maximum number of partitions, 255, giving you a maximum database size of about 8 terabytes using all the partitions. Now, in the XFOCUS world, because we have a lot more going on, we had to basically take the entire first page for the file description table. And just hold on, we'll talk about the FDT in a little bit, and you'll see what it's actually there for and what it's going to do. We've also lifted the size of the segment name to maximum 64 characters at this point. And we've increased the size of the field name to 66 characters. Why are those important? Both of those are stored as part of the FDT, the file description table, which is why there was a limitation on the size, and why we can't increase them on the FOCUS side, because we have a limit of that 4K page. All right. The ID behind the FOCUS database pages are based upon the segments. All right. It's very simple. Like data is kept together. So when you define a segment, all the data is going to be kept, all the data in that segment is going to be kept on the same page. All right. Complete segment instances only are stored in FOCUS pages. So if you don't have, if your segment instance is, let's just say, okay, you've got a 4K page. You define a focus instance of 2,500 bytes. Have to, that you have to really take a look at that. You're going to get one instance per page because you have less than 4,000 bytes to work with on that focus page, and you have to have a complete instance. So one of the things to think about if you're working with focus pages, and this applies to on-table hold as well, be careful about the stuff that you're putting in there because you may be creating problems within the size of the file simply by the size of the fields that you're asking for. WebFOCUS doesn't really give a damn about sizing, okay? It's very, if I can define a 32K field, fine, go right ahead. Well, you're going to have problems with those immediately if you're going into focus. But the point is to be careful about the size of the fields because, among other things, the file will get considerably bigger, and the I/O based on accessing that file after the fact will also get larger because you're going to have to be paging through more instances, more pages. Indexes are also kept together in a single group, in a single page, all right? And as a matter of fact, the indexes for a single field are grouped that way. They're all on a single page, all right? And if more pages are needed, like pages are chained together using pointers, and that applies to both segments, data, and the indexes, right? Now, here's a standard. This is our good old Focus car database. We use it a lot simply because it has a lot of complexity and they're very simple. It has the complexity we need to check whenever we're working. It has multiple segments. It has an index. It does have some unique segments down towards the bottom. It's easy to use. Structurally, you can see a hierarchical database can get really interesting. In this particular case, we have three segments that basically that are hanging off the comp, which is the second one down, the comp segment. We actually have car wreck, warrant, and equip are all children of that particular segment. All right. Now, this makes it easy to store data because I don't have to worry about, as long as I've got a common parent, I can just point to it. I don't have to repeat the data. And this is where the cost savings actually comes in. We save the space. Now, taking a look at the actual focus page, if you ask the operating system what kind of on a record-based system, if you ask the operating system what kind of a file is, it's going to tell you it's a flat file. All right, it doesn't have any indexing, it doesn't have any structure, it's just a string of data. All right, all of the structure of focus is actually controlled internally in the focus and the WebFOCUS product. All right, we do the management of all of that stuff. The structure is actually pretty straightforward. It's straightforward, as we talked about, this idea of common data is grouped and we put it on a page and then we link the pages together. Now in the focus, in the car file, our first page is the origin, which is the highest segment. And we've got the first origin page, we've got the FDT, the file description table, and we've also got some control data. And we'll talk a little bit about the control data so you understand what it is. That points to the next origin page. And then that will point to the next origin page as data is added to the file. First comp page, this is the second segment. First comp page has control. The FDT is only at the highest level. Has control information is available on every one of these pages, and this is where the magic happens, is in those control pages, and it points to the comp pages. The car wreck, which is the third, points to the next car wreck. The first country index page points to the next country index page. All right, and you'd have for each index that you have, you'll have one of these things set up, and these pages will be intermixed inside of the database. All right, this is the way it works. It depends on the way it grows. Now with the XFOCUS database, we're dealing with 16K pages. The very first page is FTT only and some focus control data. We have to go to the second page in order to get to the first origin page in that particular structure. And then the structure is pretty much the same as the focus file. The idea here ultimately was to make the focus file and the XFOCUS file virtually synonymous. So I don't have to worry about changing any of my applications if I want to move from a focus database to an XFOCUS database, simply because I'm running out of room in my focus database. And that's what we achieved. You don't have to change anything. Your applications can stay exactly the same. All right. You can mix focus and XFOCUS databases on the sync machine. We don't care, and this is normal. This is the way it's designed to work. We don't want it. We didn't want you to have to make that kind of a change, because there are people that are carrying 20, 30 years worth of data in focus data files, and it's not as if they can go back 30 years ago, pull out that data and put it into an XFOCUS file at this particular point. They can't, right? So that kind of thing, they need to be able to work with it. If they need to pull it out, they can get it. The insurance companies, if they need to pull that data out of a 30-year-old database, no problem. It's a focus database. They can pull it out. We can use it today. No problem, right? The FDT, what's in the file directory table? Well, the file directory table is basically tells us how the file is, what this file is really all about, and it gives us the top level view of how we're going to use it. It's set up when we're created. All right, we for every segment that we've got, we have 5 words or about 20 bytes per segment. That's going to include some very important things: the starting page number, the ending page number, the seg name or the index field name, the length of each instance, the parent number, all right, and that's the parent number of the segment, and the total number of pages and the number of pointers. If it's an index, we'll also include the type of index, which at this point is kind of, we're all B-tree at this point. We used to have a hashed index, but no longer. We have additional space built in for 7 indexes. All right. There's also DBA and encrypted DBA password information in here, in the FDT. All right. This gives us a pretty careful, an overall view of the entire file. Right. Starting page number for each segment, I know where it starts. The ending page number, the last one I wrote to. All right. Where is that? Because that's where I'm going. That tells me the range. The name of the segment, the length of each instance, how big is it? What's the parent number? Is there a parent to this segment? What is it? The total number of pages that are active for this segment. Important thing to know. And the total number of pointers. This is really important to know. This is something that can get, if you have problems, it's most likely you're going to have problems with pointers. And we'll talk about that because it's easy to fix them. All right. So let's just continue on. We'll take a look at how do we see this. All right, come on, there we go. If I want, pardon me, but I'm showing my age. This is sitting on a mainframe. If I want to see the FDT for a focus database or for an XFOCUS database, all I have to do at the command line, or I can do this in a sysin and batch as well, is issue the command # space FDT space file name. All right, and what I'm going to end up with in display or in the output, my sysprint, is this. And you can see this is everything that we pretty much got in here. All right, you've got the name of the segment, the length of the segment, the parent. All right, what the parent is, that's the number. Now, all the way on the left is the number of the segment. And if you've ever done, we saw that the check file picked, there are numbers associated with every one of those segments, and those are the numbers that you're looking at right here. All right, that basically is, those are important because we use those. The length parent number, the start, and the end. Okay, how many pages have I written? Where am I? Okay, the number of pages that currently exists and the number of links that exist there. All right, that's an easy way to see this. This gets a lot more complicated when you're dealing with an older database that has hundreds of thousands of instances, but this is where you go ultimately if you're having a problem with looking at that. If there's an issue, this is where you're going to start. Now that focus control that we saw at the end of every instance, what's in there? Okay, FTT basically tells us about the whole file. The focus control actually gives us at the end of every segment instance some information about what's in that particular instance. Now that instance has got about 128 bytes. We're going to have in there the pointer to the first logical instance in that segment, the segment number from the FTT, the date and time and transaction number for the last maintenance action. All right. The starting position of free space, the starting position of deleted space, and the deleted space is a linked list. All right, we're going to link together stuff that's no longer active. The address of the next page of like segments, which is generally where do I go after this page? All right. Now let me back up before I go. Let's do a little bit of a discussion. Deleted space is just space that's not used. If you delete something in a FOCUS database, it doesn't actually go away. We just ignore it until you rebuild it. Once you rebuild, and that's the importance, one of the major uses of the rebuild utility is to make sure that you have a way to clean out the deleted space and reclaim it, all right? If you do a lot of maintenance, if you do a lot of updates, and if you do a lot of deletes in a FOCUS database, you're going to end up with a serious disorganization problem, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And to beat that, you have to reorganize the database. Basically, put it back into this so that the logical sequence and the physical sequence match. All right, they're exactly the same. The delete, we keep track of the deleted space, and we will attempt to use deleted space under certain circumstances. But the way to get rid of it is to basically do the rebuild. Now, obviously, we need to know where the next block, the next page of data is, because this is the chain that allows us to follow that we go through when we go looking for a specific field in a specific segment. We have to follow that chain all the way to the end, or until, if you're in modify, until we find the data record that you're looking for. All right, how do we see this? Well, there is a way where we can see the file controls, and this is an aggregate form of the file controls by using !, space file, space car. And again, what we're going to see here is a lot of information, and a lot of this is very useful. You can see that we've got active counts, deleted counts. We know how many of each, and we maintain that. Obviously, if you see a lot of deletions, you need to seriously consider doing the rebuild. We maintain the total number of segments, characters, and pages, and we have an indication of when the last change was made. All right. Okay. Now, this gives us the statistics on the number of occurrences for each segment, all right? And this is coming from both the FTT and the focus control. The primary purpose of this stuff is to allow us to maintain physical consistency in the file, and this is the most important thing. Putting data into the file is only useful if the file remains consistent, right? If I lose a record because the pointers get messed up, that's of no use whatsoever, and that's something that we've spent we spent a lot of time making sure doesn't happen. We verify the number of pages per segment. All right. We count the number of deleted segments. We verify the correct last page, the correct segment number, and we calculate the active count. That's what you saw on that page, and that's all from using the FTT and the focus control at the end of every segment. All right, so there's a lot of work when you do a ! file. Right, we do a fair amount of activity. Now, as I said, there's this concept of disorganization. How do we add data to this database? We can only add data primarily to the end of the file, all right? And what that means is we have to split a block. If I have a record that I need to put in the middle of a block or in a block, I'm going to split that block and add a block to the end. And that's where I'm going to put the data, but I'm going to have a pointer in my original block that's going to point to the block at the end of the table, and a pointer from there back to the block that was split. All right, and that's what I mean by block splitting. What does this do? This slows things down on retrieval. All right, so one of the reasons you don't want high disorganization in hierarchical structures is you end up going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you spend all of your time not doing retrieval, just trying to find things. All right, you're chasing chains. So the thing you want to do is to maintain a low level of disorganization. We measure it using question mark file, and we will actually give you an indication of how close you are, with the degree to which the physical placement of the data file is different from its logical order. If the data is in the logical order that we expect it to be in, we'll have our fastest retrieval, especially if we have an index. If it's not, we're going to do a lot of jumping around the database, and that slows things down, and we don't like that. Below 30% disorganization, we're not going to show you anything. If you're above 30%, you're going to see a message come back. If you're on you'll see it somewhere, wherever your screen is displaying, whether it's if it's in batch, it's going to come out in your JES. Otherwise, it's going to come up to the screen. On the WebFOCUS side, it's going to be on your source, the source output. And it's basically, we're going to tell you, you need to rebuild this. And we're going to tell you how disorganized it is right now. And we're basically indicate that you need to, for performance purposes, you need to reorganize this. All right. Now, each segment instance is constructed with pointers and a segment instance. All right. And they're just from end to end. I have pointers and a segment instance. Pointers for A and segment instance for A. Pointers for B and segment instance for B. All right. I will pad every instance to the end of to a full word boundary. All right. And for each instance pointer is 4 bytes, and that includes a page and a word offset. There are 3 types of pointers, and I mentioned this before, that the child parent, which is normal for a hierarchy. No, that's not the one that's normal. The parent to child is the one that's normal for a hierarchy. The child to parent is the one that is not normal. This is the one that we specifically added to speed things up. The chaining, for the forward chain moving from one block to the next block with the common data, is also a pointer, and we have the parent to child. Now, here's simple database structure. I've got a very simple one field. They're all S1s. I've got two children of the info database. Now, the way this would look data-wise is simply, okay, I've got Sue, my first instance. She's a programmer. All right. Now, if I add a record to Sue and she becomes a project leader, I don't have to repeat her record anymore because I've already got that. But I do have to add an instance in the job title. And I'm going to have to chain that. I'm going to have to point from PGMR to project leader because I'm going to want the latest one. All right, I retain that. And I do need the parent, the child to parent back to Sue. So that's what gets built. Now, in terms of my programming language, Sue started out as a COBOL programmer. And when I add COBOL, I get both the parent to child and child to parent pointers. She's also picked up FOCUS, so I get a pointer from COBOL to FOCUS, and I also have my pointer back to my FOCUS pointer back to Sue. This is really, and these are the only 2 things I've gotten here, so this is very simple. The idea then is also Sue has a pointer to the next person, the next emp ID. That's the chain, all right? And this is the way the database is built. And this is fairly rapid. Now, how do I tell that my pointers are correct? Well, there is a way to do it. It is very simple. And this is generally the way that we do it. We count the instances in the physical order of the file using the question mark file command. Question mark file doesn't read the logical structure, it reads the physical file structure. So we count the number of instances in the physical order. And then we count the number of instances in the logical order of the file. How do I do that? Well, I turn all on, and then I use table F. Table F reads the pointer structure, and that's what I want. I want logical key order, and that is what's preserved in the pointers. If I use table, the highest level, the top segment, is not read using the pointers. It's read physically. All right. So this is a way. This gives me a count of the logical order. I've got a count of the physical order, and obviously, if the two counts disagree, then I've got a problem. All right. It's pretty simple to figure out. Now, rebuild. I can use rebuild check also to find out if I've got an internal pointer problem. It doesn't dump the data. It just does some reading under the covers. It displays an error message when errors are found, and it will bounce around. It'll branch around any error, basically, to continue the rebuild check so that all the entire file is checked. Now, you're going to find a pointer that may point to the end, to past the end of the file. All right, that's a fairly common thing. It points to an address, in effect, that doesn't exist. So we don't crash, and rebuild just ignores that and says, okay, this is this is clearly not right. We're going to branch around and go to check. We'll continue on our check. All right. Now, rebuild is also useful, as I mentioned before, for rebuilding the file itself. And it will rebuild and put the file back into a pristine physical order matches logical order. Very straightforward. Rebuild, reorg, dump, and load allows me to actually change the file very easily. I can add keys, delete keys. I can change segment positions. If I want to do that, the fastest way to do it is with a rebuild, reorg. Okay, I dump the data, and then I basically reload it into a different master file or a modified master file. And in doing so, I create that new focus file. It too is in pristine order. If I have an index issue, if I have a problem with index, I don't have a way to check the indexes. It's just as easy to rebuild them. The indexes basically exist as their own set of pages. All right. And that's actually a good thing, because the rebuild index basically just rereads the file based on the indexes, and rewrites at the end of the file a new set of pages for the indexes. Right. So that's a very useful thing to be able to do. Now, obviously, if you do either a rebuild rebuild or a rebuild reorg dump and load, you're going to end up with the indexes being rebuilt. Big databases. One of the things we've always said, if you've got big databases with lots of indexes, do the rebuilds without the indexes. Because the rebuild index, the indexing will take a lot of extra work. Much easier to do them without the indexes and then do a separate pass doing a rebuild index to put the indexes back in, and much, much faster. And if you want to build a multi-dimensional index, you have to use the rebuild MD index. All right. Okay, that's for starters on focus databases and XFOCUS databases. At some point a little later, I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit more about how we do things internally inside of table and modify and that sort of stuff. Any questions?
Doug Lee wants to know if we're going to get check file picture back.
In or you mean in WebFOCUS?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the question.
Check file picture. Okay,
Wait,
let me go
Doug,
back.
I'm sorry, did you ask that picture? It popped up on my screen.
He wants to know if we'll ever get a check file picture back in a nice format.
Oh,
In a nice format. Yeah.
Because when it comes up in HTML, we lose all the consecutive spaces.
That's correct.
If you do a view source, though, you should see the real spaces.
Yeah, there you see, this has to do with the type, the text, the font that's used to print these things. And in source, we're still using the old fixed font. Unfortunately, in HTML, we're using proportional fonts, and that makes a mess of everything,
Well,
right?
plus consecutive spaces get trimmed to one space.
Yep. The other
Yep.
thing is there is go over into the console and go into the run as focus area, and that will give you the ability to actually run focus commands and take a look at it. All right. Now there are some new things. There are some things that are probably going to be coming based on that. And
Good.
we'll
Good.
have more to talk about that later in the year.
Thank you, guys. You always have something new and exciting.
Anything else?
There's a function question. In the functions examples, I saw a mainframe form when testing the functions. I understood that in WebFOCUS, it's possible to develop those forms for mainframe. Am I correct? I'm not sure what's being asked here.
Come on, where's my?
Hi.
Ricardo?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so what are you looking for here?
When you were explaining about the functions, I saw like a form, a mainframe, like a mainframe form where you were testing the padding, the series padding, and well, I'm not that familiar to WebFOCUS, and I was wondering if well, this is the first time that I see that form in the for mainframe, so that I was wondering that if it's
Okay.
possible to do it, and what would I need to do?
So what I was showing was it's called a CRT form, and
Okay.
it's specific really to the mainframe, but we have something new that's going to be available soon, which will allow you to do CRT form from the WebFOCUS environment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So in which version?
9.2.
9.2. Ah, okay.
Right, well,
The early versions, yes. Yeah, it's in 9.2.
Ah,
9.2 is coming out very shortly. And there's later in the year, there's something else coming. So
okay. Okay. That answered my questions. Thank you.
yeah, normally in the WebFOCUS world, you would do an HTML form.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
In rebuild, I thought you could only move fields between a unique segment and a parent, that you couldn't move them around because otherwise you wouldn't know where to put them.
in rebuild, you can restructure the whole file because you're literally reloading it. The rebuild reorg.
Yeah, but think about it. If you have a parent with 5 children and you move a field from the child to the parent, which one goes in? That's why I thought it was only between uniques and parent.
No, it's. I think it's actually. We did some work with extract. When we first did extract, I don't know if you remember extract.
Oh yeah.
And that's actually starting to come back now because there's some additional functionality. But one of the things that, if you wanted to promote fields, you could do that. If you wanted to delete fields, you could do that. Because effectively all we're doing is dumping the data into a temporary file and reloading what it is that we need. And we're going to obviously take if, for instance, if you're promoting a field, from a child to a parent, you're probably going to take the first one. And that would make sense because if promoting it to the parent, obviously you're not going to, the duplication is not going to be, you've already got it there. You don't need to redo it. Now, that would mean, though, if there is a different value there at that lower level, you're going to end up with a different value at the higher level. As a, literally as a second field, as a second instance, right?
I don't know. That's why I thought it only handled unique between uniques and parents.
Well,
In the
uniques, we
back.
are, well,
Because
with unique,
you know, there's a one-to-one relationship, so there was no question.
right. No, I mean, you can, I don't think we've ever stopped you from doing this. I mean, yes, logically, you might end up with a problem, but there's also the ability that you may actually want to move it up to the
Right.
higher level, right? And in doing so, you have to, obviously, when you're doing this stuff, there's nothing automatic about it. You have to pay attention to what you're doing, right? If you're going to move something to a higher level, you're now making it the parent of whatever it was. So you're right. If I was to say, I'm going to take the city out of a city state address layer, I have a street, city, state, and if I want to promote the state, I can do that. But the state will apply when I reload it to only those records that were actually, and I will actually change the structure of the file as a result of that. Right? Because I will no longer duplicate state in every one of those addresses. There's only going to be one instance at the higher level. Right. So it's, yeah, I think that's ultimately, and is this something that's used a lot? No. I mean, for the most part, the addition or the deletion of indexes was a big thing. It is a big thing. I want to add an index or I want to get rid of an index. How do I do that?
Yeah, and we talked about checking validation. When you count the field in a unique segment, don't you get the count of the parent?
You don't count the unique segments. We don't
Okay.
see those. We don't see those. And specifically because we assume it's part of, yeah, remember count is it, we don't count, we count the instance, right? The way that retrieval is done, we retrieve, and when we do a retrieval inside of Focus, we retrieve an instance, and that is everywhere from the top of the file to the lowest point that I can go. That's one instance, all right? With unique segments, we automatically assume with the unique segment that it's part of its parent. So we don't count it. I mean, it's virtually, in terms of count, it's ignored. Right.
On a table command, because you were doing a table command of one field per segment to match against a question mark file.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But doesn't table make up an instance if it's not there? Of blanks and zeros?
I think we had all equals on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might, but it again, if we're not counting, and that's a good question, Art. If we're not counting the unique segment, it doesn't really care.
But if we are, you get a count that's the same as the parent, as opposed to the count of the instances from that would show up on the question mark file.
Well, okay, under those circumstances, you're absolutely right. There is no way to differentiate between the unique segment and the parent.
Right.
All right. It's when we're doing retrieval, they are the same thing. All right. In modify, that's not the case, but in table, when we're doing table, it is.
Right.
Right. It's so whether it has a value or not doesn't really make any difference. I can't tell missingness. I mean, the missingness of a unique segment is where you're going, right? And we're always going to assume there's one there. Always, whether you have it there or not, we're going to assume there's one there, right? So that's not, we don't count those. What else you got?
That's all I got.
We are
You got
over
that?
our time.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming. Next month, what are we doing next month? Quick, where's my? Be sure to join us next month.
SQL.
SQL, we're doing a bunch of things next month. Walter, you're doing some SQL stuff?
Okay.
Okay. I think. Are you?
I don't know. You have the list.
Let me go open that And that list only exists over here. Let me do a real quick open on it, and it opens up and it says, hello,
How many screens do you have, Walter?
I have 3 operating.
That's what I thought.
It's like,
Other
okay,
than your laptop, right?
yeah, okay, here we go. Come on. No, wrong one.
For those of you who are doing the evaluation, don't get scared if you get a pop-up that says you're about to go to a site. That's normal. It's just basically telling you you're leaving the WebEx environment.
Next week is, yes, Walter's doing SQL to create reports. I'm doing multidimensional indexing, and Mark is doing creating a lookup function for maintain. So we'll see you guys then.